Back in October, I ran my first half marathon. I thought about warning you all if you saw me on the streets working out. I was not dying, in fact. It's roughly a 13-mile run, and I've run for a long, long time, but this was the first race in about 15 years, and it was the longest distance I had run by far. For some people, 13 miles sounds crazy. For a few of you, it's only half of a marathon, half of the real thing. But it was a decent challenge for me. The challenge came not in any single moment. Neither the race itself or the individual training runs were especially awful. The real challenge came in the discipline of training. For a couple of months, I ran 3 times a week. One run each week was a long run. It got longer and longer every week. Without running at least that frequently, it's nearly impossible to run a significant distance. It's a huge time commitment. It takes strategy with your calendar and with your diet. At some point in the middle of all this training, I realized that I was more disciplined about running than I was with a lot of other pieces of my life. And I began to wonder, what would happen if I invested the same disciplined effort in my relationships with friends and family as I did my running? After all, relationships don't always just happen. If there's any geographical distance involved, or if you have a busy work schedule, relationships take work. Even relationships that we're told are supposed to be easy and natural take a healthy amount of attention. On Facebook, I often see this notion that you should figure out what you love and do that professionally, and your life will be easy. I think this saying says, choose a job you love and you will never work a day in your life. That is nonsense. Being passionate about what you do can certainly inspire you. It can energize you and maybe even help you find joy in your work, but it still takes effort and discipline. I think this is a common misconception about artists and musicians, that you just love your art so much that every moment is a pleasure. And yeah, creative expression is a joy, but honing a talent into something really special takes tremendous discipline and effort. The same could be said of any career that we're passionate about. It could be said of the task of caring for sick family members or parenting. In fact, I would say the opposite of that cliche is true. Find something that you truly love and you will work your butt off the rest of your life. Parenting and marriage are hard work. Maintaining friendship and making new ones is hard work. Maintaining relationships with parents is hard work. And it costs a lot of money. If there's any geographical distance, there's a hefty expense. Most of us, it turns out, have been working most of our lives to express our love for others. Whether that's in the form of family, friends, or community, most of us, most people around the world have worked tremendously hard to make their love manifest. That discipline can look very different from one person to the next. In fact, expressing our caring is so diverse that sometimes it's unrecognizable. This may have happened to you when you realize that someone who cares about you is doing it in a way that isn't especially helpful or even frustrating. The other day, I was talking to a friend and venting about some challenge. His response was to try to solve the problem for me, offering an array of suggestions that I, of course, had already thought of and tried. As I listened to him, I'm thinking, you know I'm not stupid, right? His second good-hearted attempt was to paint a glossy veneer over the challenge, pointing out that everything would be okay with time. Thank you. Thank you for your sunshine and rainbows. I feel much better. I was feeling frustrated with him for a few days until we spoke again, and suddenly I realized that I was doing the exact same thing. Rather than listening and sympathizing, I was trying to solve his problems and telling him everything would be okay. We all work at caring for others. Sometimes we spend so much of our time doing it that it becomes a habit. We do the same thing over and over without really thinking about it. Whether it's cutting the crust off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, making a solid income, telling a friend it will be okay, or working hard to inspire our community. We tend to engage in a style of caring over and over again in a habitual way. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Part of my goal today is to honor the discipline that we all put into loving. I also want to invite us to look at our habits of loving. There are a lot of ways we show we care. There's a guy named Gary Chapman that wrote a book several years ago about what he calls love languages. You've heard me talk about this before. The book was a giant hit, and love languages sounds very cheesy, I know, but I find it helpful. It's actually one of the few pieces that I talk about with couples before I perform marriages with them. Whether it's in romantic relationships or with our wider family, each of us expresses caring through 5 different methods, 5 languages. They're words of affirmation, acts of service, giving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. This list of love languages is kind of a helpful way of categorizing the huge array in which we manifest love in the world. Now, whether you keep with the 5 languages or you address that broad spectrum, the multiplicity of ways of expressing our love brings up 2 challenges. The first is to recognize that other people's caring for us may not look exactly like what we expect. The best example I could come up this week was parents and children. It's difficult for children to understand that broccoli, toothbrushing, and homework are part of showing love. Or that spending long hours at the office away from home is what brings financial stability to the family. Among adults, the challenge is more nuanced. People who care about us may be working very hard to care in ways that we don't even recognize. So it's worth looking carefully to see and enjoy how loved we are by others. The second challenge brought up by love languages is to put in a little extra effort to express our love in a way that will be recognizable. useful, and hopefully endearing. Like I mentioned before with my friends, sometimes we get into the habit of trying to express our caring over and over. The idea of working smarter, not harder, came to mind. Buying more gifts, doing more and more errands, saying more and more words of comfort may just be spinning our wheels. Our intentions would be better served by asking, what do you need? So if you pay attention to sermon titles, you may have found this one a little peculiar. The title, Taming the Fox, comes from a passage from the beloved book, The Little Prince. The book is a story about a little prince who goes on a great journey to find a way of protecting a rose that grows on his small planet. On that journey, the prince meets a fox, and this following is a passage from that book. "Come and play with me," proposed the little prince. "I cannot play with you," the fox said. "I am not tamed." What does that mean, tame? It's an act too often neglected, said the fox. It means to establish ties. If you tame me, then we shall need each other. To me, you shall be unique in all the world. To you, I shall be unique in all the world. One only understands the things that one tames. If you want a friend, tame me. What must I do to tame you? Asked the prince. You must be patient, replied the fox. First, you will sit down at a little distance from me, like that, in the grass. I shall look at you out of the corner of my eye, and you will say nothing. Words are sources of misunderstanding. But you must sit a little closer to me every day, and you must come back at the same hour. If you come at just any time, I shall never know at what hour my heart is to be ready to greet you. One must observe the proper rites. And so the prince tamed the fox. It was then that the fox shared a secret with the little prince. The fox said, "It's only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." This passage about making friends this week reminded me of the discipline involved in building our relationships. I've already talked quite a bit about that discipline, but there are two other pieces of this passage that can't be missed. One is the notion of being unique. The fox says, "If you tame me, then to me you shall be unique in all the world. And to you, I shall be unique in all the world." This is such an interesting description of sincere friendship. To know someone as unique in all the world transcends categorization. They become not just someone who falls into the category of friend, but a special, unique individual. They become, by definition, irreplaceable. The bond extends beyond the label of friend or family member. It's a recognition of the supreme gift of an individual soul. If you tame me, then to me you shall be unique in all the world, and to you I shall be unique in all the world. Now, the other compelling piece of this description comes in the notion of taming. Taming is a complicated word, not often associated with friendship. We often think of it as controlling with cages or a lion tamer with a whip. But taming described here is something subtle. Rather than control, this sense of taming is built on trust and mutual respect. It's about patience and demonstrating reliability, with steps closer and closer until one day you find that you need each other. I want to wrap up by bringing us back to Valentine's Day, as Connie brought up earlier. We're talking about love all month, and Valentine's Day is just around the corner. I hope this sermon lays a slightly different foundation for Valentine's Day. Maybe it can be a day to consider different ways of loving more fully and deeply, based on what's truly needed. Maybe it can be a day to open our awareness to the many different ways that people express love for us. Most of us spend most of our lives working to express our caring for others in 1,000 different ways. That kind of dedication is most certainly worth a day of celebration. Amen.